Okay, Module 1. Well, Module 1 was all about helping children learn with mind maps. So the first thing that we did was to point out how mind maps could be used in lessons in various ways. Firstly, mind maps could be used with pupils before a lecture or a lesson started. This would help prime, this would help show the big picture, and this could also be used for the students themselves to ascertain their own prior knowledge. Mind maps can be used during the lesson to clarify, and an incomplete, or we could call it perhaps a half-baked mind map, would allow the student to add their individual insights to the basic mind map template that the teacher or trainer provides at the front end of the course. They can add to it as they go along. This enables them to add their own insights as a lesson progresses. And finally, a mind map can be used after the lesson to review and recall the main features of the lecture or lesson, and can actually be used for the students themselves to self-assess their own learning. So in other words, the teacher can go through the mind map with them as a review at the end of the lesson, as I'm doing at the moment with you reviewing this module, but also the students can go through the mind map themselves in their own head, or pair share. They can pair up with another student, and between them they can assess how much of the lesson they have actually absorbed. I mentioned pair share. Pair share is a particularly good way of getting students to interact with their own thinking, but also to interact with another student. So pair share, which mind maps are ideal for, enhance understanding. They can help students become clearer with their speaking and the way that they can talk about ideas. And actually, when you're doing pair share, each student is developing their interpersonal intelligence. Now, the beauty of helping children learn with mind maps is that the technique appeals to the whole brain, both left and right side. And it also appeals to all learning styles. So now, as I state elsewhere on some of my other courses, learning styles really aren't very scientifically underpinned. So the idea that we have a main learning style is actually quite seriously flawed. But if either the teacher or the student believes that they have a dominant learning style, so that they're either visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, well, actually mind mapping appeals to each of these learning styles. There is a very definite, and I say this loudly and clearly, there is a very definite kinesthetic appeal to mind maps. There is very much an auditory appeal to mind maps. I've just talked about the pair share aspect. Well, this is where they're speaking, listening to each other, speaking out loud, hearing themselves. So we are engaging, when we read mind maps, we are engaging our auditory channel. And of course, mind mapping is very visual, and in particular engages our visual spatial working memory, which is something that if we're working with bullet points or lists, or we're working off a flip chart, we are not engaging our spatial working memory. Now, another great benefit for students when they're using mind maps on a regular basis is how mind map helps develop thinking skills. Thinking can become much more visual, it's much more systematic, and actually it encourages the student to think in two different ways. One is divergent, where they appreciate how they can start with relatively little and use the mind mapping principle almost in what people have called a brainstorming mode to be divergent with thinking and come up with fresh ideas. But more importantly, mind mapping is really great at converging thinking. So taking complex ideas and using the mind mapping principles to actually simplify those ideas, converge them into the essence of a topic, for example. Now, mind mapping encourages students to gather their thoughts, to reflect on their thoughts, and to digest their own thoughts and the thoughts of others. Mind mapping encourages preparation before the student leaps in, for example, writing an essay. Actually, what we find is that students begin to love mind mapping once they really truly understand the principles. And so they really do want to create a mind map as a way of preparing their essay. Mind mapping encourages clarity because, apart from anything else, two things really. One is that a map is spread out. There's plenty of white space, and so we can see the ideas clearly and clearly on a single sheet of paper. Mind mapping encourages both synthesis and analysis. So the synthesis is where we're putting together new ways of looking at things, and this is basically what creativity stems from, synthesis. So the mind mapping principle is great for creative thinking, but also it could encourage analysis. Analysis is where we break things down into its important bits. And, as we look at the mind map here, that's what we have before us. We have all the important bits arranged hierarchically on one sheet of paper. So finally, in summary to how mind maps can help students learn with mind maps, is that mind maps help with listening, they help with memory, they help with recall and retention. And if there are any teachers and trainers out there who don't appreciate how mind mapping can help with listening, memory, recall and retention, then my best-selling mind mapping course explains all of that in great detail.